Hello and welcome to this Power Platform Architecture series on Power Virtual Agents. This is the sixth session in the series, the last one. If this is the first one you've reached, then please take a look at the channel, go back and have a look through. All these sessions knit together into a complete set of training on Power Virtual Agents. I'm Matt Farmer, and with me we've got Kent Weare and Abhi Rathinavelu, and we're going to take you through some of the things to consider about governance of your PVA bot. So yeah, just if you're not familiar with the series, this is designed for architects, developers, IT pros. If you're responsible, the person who's designing a Power Virtual Agent solution, you're putting it together and you want to consider what you need to know, what you need to decide upon when putting together your PVA bot. This is the series for you, but we do recommend you start at the beginning. But on to governance. So we're going to be talking about really when you've made your bot, you've put it all together, you really need to think about how you're going to put it into production and manage it. That's what we're going to cover in this session. So just quickly talking through the architecture that we've built so far. We've built out a PVA bot. We've connected it to channels for deployment. We've added things like connectivity to Microsoft Power Automate and used their connectors to connect into backend systems. We looked at how we can extend the bot with things like Bot Framework Composer and Azure Bot Services, Bot Framework Skills. And we've also looked at things like advanced topics like connecting it to omni-channel for customer service, pulling out data into things like Power BI from the bot, and also how we connect out to identity providers for authentication. This time, we're going to be looking at things like environments and how we deploy our bot and manage it in production. So let's start by talking about environments. So there's a huge amount of the content that we're going to cover today that stretches across all of the Power Platform. And obviously, we're not going to cover every single facet of those discussion points. A lot of these things we're going to talk about are ones you can go away and learn a lot more about because they do cover the whole of the Power Platform if you're deploying all of the Power Platform services. But let's just start with environments because they're really, really key to understanding some of the things we're going to be talking about today. So your environments are actually something that sit within what's called a tenant. Your tenant is kind of your organization within the Power Platform. It contains all of the security information and licenses and things like that that apply across your organization. Within that, we have what we call environments. And your environment is a package of a database normally, so your Dataverse instance, as well as all your Power Platform services that you configured, so your bots, your apps, your Power Automate flows, as well as some things for Microsoft Dynamics as well. All your Dynamics environments are in there too. Now, if you want to, you can go through and just create one environment and have all your bot in it and deploy it and be good. But we would absolutely not recommend you do that. So that's kind of at the most basic level what you can do. You can create one environment and deploy that. But we're assuming as you're going through this series, you're thinking about this and maybe at an enterprise level or a big customer level, and you want to know the best practice about how to do this. So one environment is not what you need. Generally, customers are deploying more than that. So this is kind of a normal setup that you would have your environments for development, test, and production. If you've ever done any application lifecycle work, this will be super familiar. That environment container is the container for all your source and then can get packaged up and moved between environments with a tool we call solutions. And we'll go into that in a minute. So most customers, I would say, are using something like this where they have multiple different environments and they're moving their configured Power Platform solutions, including PVA, between dev, test, and production, and maybe some other environments depending on their testing needs, how in which they go about validating what they've built. But you can go even further than that, depending on your use case. And yes, sorry, there's some text there just saying you're using export and import between environments, that's solution packaging, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. Some customers can go even further than that. So within your tenant, your environments actually all sit within a region, and that wasn't on the previous diagram. But for certain, if you're a global customer, if you have a global website that you're using where you maybe want a PVA bot, then you're probably looking at some kind of configuration like this, where you have multiple environments for dev test production in each region where you're deploying your Power Platform assets. This can get a bit complicated, obviously, but there's a good reason for it. For example, if I want to create a bot in the United States and then I want to also use it in Europe, there's probably other changes and things like that you want to make with that bot when you deploy it to other regions. So a practice would be you develop your bot in dev in the United States, then you export it to Europe development environment where they make changes and translations, and then deploy to those different regions, production environments for management as well. So there's a lot of consideration of what your business use case is, how you're using your bot, for how you set up your environments, but that's the kind of the fundamental thing that we base a lot of the management upon. So ALM, or Application Lifecycle Management with PVA. And I think there's probably a lot we can talk about in this area, but I'll go through kind of just the basics. And I shouldn't have to say this now, but it's always a thing sometimes you have to tell customers about. PVA is a no-code tool for building bots, and customers love that. But if you're doing it at any kind of scale whatsoever, either for an internal use case or an external one, please make sure that what you've built is being checked into source control and managed that way. You can use the export process within PVA to export your bot, but please make sure you do that, even if you're not doing any of the other ALM stuff. But we're going to tell you do the other ALM stuff as well.
Yes. So Matt, can I add a point here? So one thing is, like, when you're creating these bots, you will also note that there is something called a default environment in the product itself, right? And that default environment is something which we give you for you to try out or like kick the tires and build your basic bot and explore the functionalities. But whenever you actually are going to take your bot to do something more substantial, even for your test environment or even to your production, you should start looking into moving away from the default bot and start creating your own environment as per Matt's guidelines and then start using it. So that's another key point to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, good point, Abhi. Good point. And that's also, I mean, the next point there, that's something that's the same across the Power Platform, right? Is that PVA is also, if you're already using the Power Platform and doing application lifecycle with it for things like Power Apps, PVA is going to be very, very similar. And that's a really good thing because you only have to learn kind of the technologies once. So there aren't many areas where it's massively different or anything to be considered. If you're using the Power Platform tools, you should be able to get PVA working great for application lifecycle. How we do that? Basically, your bot is packaged together. So in the Power Apps portal, you can go in and export your bot, choose the bot that you want actually package up as a solution. And then you can also check for dependencies. So things like your Power Apps, Power Automate flows, connectors, bring them into one solution. And another thing that sometimes people don't always realize is the file we generate is a zip file. So it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Check it in. If you just do that, create your zip file, unpackage it, and check it into source control, whichever source control service you use. It's a bunch of files contained in the zip. There's a whole bunch more reading about this, and it's a big topic, so we're not going to cover everything here. But those are kind of the basics. And once you have that file, then you move them between environments. But follow the link there to learn more. But please make sure you check your bot in.
And one other thing, just around the environment side of things, and we talk about transporting our bots from one environment to another, is do think about like the data loss prevention policies that are in the environments, because organizations have a choice of using tenant-wide DLP policies, or they will have environment-specific DLP policies. So you do want to make sure that that is consistent so that you don't move your bot from one environment to another environment and then find out that you've got an inconsistent policy and one of your flows is subsequently disabled. So something just to be mindful in that whole environment conversation as well.
Yeah, I mean, just on that one, Ken, I mean, this is where this whole discussion goes from a kind of a PVA thing to a how are you managing your Power Platform environments, right? How do you make sure you are doing change control across them, or even, do you build them from scripts, those kind of things. So, I mean, the other thing with this is don't leave this to the last minute because there's quite often a lot of work here if you do need to get them live. Certainly, I've had customers that have slightly shortchanged this area, but then realize they need to catch up once they've gone live. But I think the best plan for success is to have this as sprint zero tasks you need to be setting up so you have that build pipeline. So how are you building that build pipeline? Well, you can use any source control management system you want. As just said, the solution files that we export this is a file containing files. But if you want to accelerate this, there's a couple of tool sets you can use that make this a lot easier. So one of them is the build task for Power Platform. So for Azure DevOps. So if you were using Azure DevOps, you can install these tools, kind of like an app, and then it gives you a whole bunch of tasks that you can build, that you can add into your DevOps pipelines to make it super easy. And they'll do things like, unpacking the solution you've generated and importing it into your environment. You can do things like, you can see there, reset environment. So a lot of these tasks would be scripts or API calls, things like that. The tasks within here make that easy, so you don't have to worry about it. So if you're using Azure DevOps, it's a no-brainer, as we say. The other option in this area is GitHub Actions. So GitHub Actions is, again, a pipeline tool for the GitHub suite. You can generate, in a similar way you do with Azure DevOps, a bunch of pre-created actions that will allow you to export your bot, store it to source control, import it back into another environment and run it. So it's definitely one to go and have a look at, because it's going to make this a much easier process to do.
And then I think one of the benefits of using either of these models, whether it's Azure DevOps or GitHub, is this ability to have that consistent deployment experience, and then also have consistent security profiles for people deploying the bot. So if we do think about like a team environment where, Matt might be working on sort of the first iteration and Abhi's working on the second iteration, and they want to go ahead and deploy those bots, you need to have the right access in the target environment. Otherwise, you're going to get in conflict from a database integrity perspective when you deploy the solution itself. So having that streamlined and consistent security profile applied just ensures that you can go ahead and move these bots and not run into any sort of collisions with other people that may have previously deployed that solution package. So that's definitely one of many benefits of leveraging either of these two automated approaches.
Yeah, and those sorts of problems you find are always ones where people wish they'd put this stuff in place earlier, because it takes, once you've found a problem that's caused like that, it's more difficult to go and put this in place and then redo it. So the sooner you can tackle this and get it in place, the benefit you're going to reap from it.
Yeah, definitely.
So quick mention of managed and unmanaged solutions. Again, if you've done Power Platform stuff, you will probably be familiar with this, but the Power Platform gives you the ability to choose how the solution is packaged up and moved between environments. And that changes, there's a slide next that will show the changes in kind of the layering of that application. But the basic way to think about it is an unmanaged solution is kind of like your source. It's like, it's the raw stuff that makes up your solution, like a set of source code. And it's there to be changed and modified. When you turn it into a managed solution, it's kind of, as it says there, like a build artifact, and it's kind of a version of something. And you then take that and move it between your environments. And the idea is a managed solution is one that shouldn't really be altered. There are some conditions where you can, but it doesn't necessarily mean you should. I think if we pop to the next slide, that gives us a bit more understanding of the layers. Abhi, Ken, I don't know if you want to talk to this and what we've seen with customers, but this diagram kind of shows how those layers come together as part of the solution.
Yeah, sure. I can take a stab at this. But so typically what you see here is on the bottom layer, we've got the system layer. And so Microsoft itself will go ahead and deploy assets to environments using solutions itself. And now in these cases, the solutions are managed, they're sealed. And what has also happened is that there's a feature called managed properties. And when you flip that bit to say managed properties are enabled, what it prevents is anyone from making any changes. So naturally, Microsoft releasing source code, we don't want customers to change it because it could actually disrupt the functioning of the system itself. Now, from a customer perspective, what you can do is you can go ahead and deploy a managed solution. And that is a best practice to always use managed solutions for promotion. So you always start in dev, you would promote to test, you would promote to prod. If you need to go ahead and make changes, you always go back to the lowest level. You'd go back to dev and then promote through test and prod again. And that's why that automation is so important, because that reduces the friction and allows you to sort of have a consistent experience when doing this. Now, by default, assuming you haven't enabled managed properties, when you deploy a managed solution, you can go ahead and make modifications. Now, you're not making modifications to that core managed solution. What you're now going to do is make those changes in an unmanaged customizations layer, which is that top blue rectangle that we do see here. Now, while this does work, this starts to create some conflicts, because as soon as you start to then promote again, you're now going to be updating the managed layer and not necessarily the unmanaged layer. And so you can start to create some conflicts. And so as a result, it's best to use managed, have a strict discipline about always starting with dev and then working your way up. And one of the challenges in the past was that we had to always modify the connections and turn or enable cloud flows on when we deployed them. And now we don't have to do that. We can actually take advantage of a feature called connection references that allows for essentially just-in-time configuration when we deploy it. So we can now deploy a managed package, modify our connection references so that we're using the right connections in the right environment, and then be able to deploy that and still maintain the integrity of the managed solution. And so that is a huge step forward for us. That was something that people had been waiting on previously, and that is your best bet. Now, when do you use unmanaged? It's generally in that dev scenario. So perhaps you want to be able to say create a backup of some of your dev work. You could expose that as an unmanaged solution and then basically go back and re-import that in order to overwrite it. If you needed to give a package to say a colleague for dev purposes, that would be another scenario where you use unmanaged. But generally think about when you go promote upstream, you want to be doing that in a managed fashion.
Yeah, just again, it's one of those ones where you can make changes, but really you should be planning not to if you can avoid it in all possible cases, right? It's just better if you have that strict organization and separation of environments. A few things that are special considerations for PVA when you're looking at ALM, and it's mainly related to the first time you run the import process. This is a pretty fast-moving area, so we're not saying this will always be the case forever, but at the time we're recording this, these are things you need to think about. That when you do that first time import, you're going to have to check your Power Automate flows are working and set up with their authentication. Things like bot framework skills, you're going to have to make sure variables you're passing into them are set when you do actually go into that environment. You're going to have to set up end user authentication and agent handoff, and then also kind of multi-channel. So if you're setting up channels like Teams or Facebook and things like that, you're going to have to check those configurations when you go and do that. So again, part of that ALM process is, don't provision your prod environment on the day you want to go live. Rehearse the process and make sure this is all set up and working smoothly before you flip that switch and go ahead. Some other things from a governance point of view are around security. We've covered security in lots of the sessions, and so I'll summarize in a minute. But one we haven't covered is the actual security for the people who are making your bot. And also bear in mind what we were saying earlier about also making sure that you are thinking about that security identity of users between different environments. But when you've created your bot, you can share it and collaborate with others. So quite often customers will have several people working on one bot, particularly if it's, different subject matter area experts producing the topic flow. But all of them have to have environment maker security role. So if you're a sysadmin, you can assign that when you share, or they need to have that in advance. And then the roles that people actually can have are the owner, the person who creates the bot themselves, a manager. So that's kind of the same as an owner, but you can't delete, but basically has full control. There's the Power Automate user, and that's, I suppose, kind of almost like a dev role. So if you have someone in the team who's a dev who's setting up the Power Automate connections, they can still edit topics, but you don't want them to do the configuration and management of the bot. That's what that user will do. And then Transcript Viewer is really for people who are there to look at the analytics. So if you, for example, are using the analytics within PVA, and you want people to be able to come in and see them and report on them, that's what that role is for. Just to note in that same area about collaboration, PVA can let, as I said, lots of people, you can share the bot with people and have them working on it at the same time. One thing that's kind of an anti-pattern to steer clear of is having them both working on the same topic at the same time. PVA isn't quite at the position yet where you have maybe in Word or PowerPoint where you can be editing the same page at the same time and see the changes. It's probably best to avoid that if you can, because you could get the scenario where you're overwriting each other at this point. That may change in the future. I said I'd summarize some of the security things we need to think about. And again, some of this has been covered in other places within this series, but just because it's a very important topic and somebody normally has the responsibility of checking these things, these are kind of the major areas you need to be thinking about from security. Is we just talked about who's actually developing the bot, and you do need to think about that across environments. So yes, who's going to be doing it in dev, but is it a system account or something that's going to be owning the bot within your UAT environment, your production environment? Best to plan that in advance and think that through. How is the bot identifying users? So does the bot need to know who is using it? Again, I think we covered this before and said it's a lot easier if that's an internal scenario. It can get a bit more complicated if it's an external scenario. But do you need to configure identity provider configuration, OAuth, things like that? When is the bot identifying users? So similar to that, do you want people to sign in when they start using it? Or is this something that happens when they hit a particular topic or conversation, so you can trigger it from there? Or is this something that happens in the background with single sign-on? And then finally, securing the bot on its host channel. So if your bot is a public bot, Abhi talked about this in session 2, do you need to secure it so that the bot can only be instantiated from the website it's supposed to be sitting on? And we have a tool called Web Channel Security that allows you to set up that exchange.
When you're moving the bot from one environment to another, the access information is not persisted, in the sense like if you've shared the bot with the X number of users and you're moving it from one environment to another, right? Depending on the persona of the role of the person who is moving the bot, they will become the new owner of that bot. So that's something to also keep in mind. So it's the best practice is to always let the IT admin to do this task of moving the bot from one environment to another, and then the bot authors will be the collaborators on the bot. So that way the IT admin maintains the ownership of the bot across all the environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just something to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And again, the earlier you set this and get this, planned, you don't end up in a situation where you're having to retrofit some of these things as you get closer to go live. Right? Quick mention of the Center of Excellence Starter Kit. So this is a cross Power Platform set of tooling built with the Power Platform by colleagues of ours that allows you to bring in all the details about your Power Platform environments from your Dataverse database into a consistent single place. It's free to set up and use. Other than using your environment, so we'd highly recommend it. It's been updated for PVA, so you get information about all the PVA bots that you have, how much they're being used. So from an admin's point of view, it gives you kind of a one-stop shop so that you can see all the things that your different bots are doing, and you can customize it. It's shared open source through GitHub. But you can customize it as you need as well. So it's kind of again, said no-brainer earlier. This one also is, if you're even if you're only using just PVA, you still get a bunch of functionality that's really useful to be checking on. And you can do things like look at connectors and things. You're obviously going to be using those with PVA as well. So highly recommend clicking that link and trying it out. One quick other topic, just in the governance area. And this is a feature that is, at time of recording, hot off the press, and one we've certainly been waiting for because it's one that's fed back from a lot of customers. But it's also a governance thing because you have to build this into the running of your bot, and that is getting information about where you have overlaps in triggers, your topic triggers, and what topics people are asking for that you're not able to trigger. So earlier on in the series, we talked about kind of the "did you mean" dialogues that come up in PVA, talking about when we have too much information and not sure when to direct someone, or we don't have enough information. And the tooling here that will be part of PVA, or at the time you're looking at this, should be part of PVA, is allowing you to make sure that you're not getting too many overlapping triggers. And that you're allowing for people, making sure you're reacting to what your customers are putting into your bot. But that process of looking at this, managing it, iterating it back into your dev environment is all going to have to be something that you plan in on a regular basis as part of making your bot great. But I think it's very important to making a really successful bot and making sure you're meeting your customers' needs. So that's the end of the session. So a quick summary of what we've discussed today. We went quickly through, environments, making sure that you understand what environment's for and develop a strategy around them that's appropriate for not only your bot, but all across your Power Platform assets. Understand that there are automation tools out there to help you create application lifecycle pipelines for your Power Platform assets, including PVA. Go and look at the tooling for DevOps and GitHub and make this as easy as possible to create. But we really do recommend you go and do that rather than, having a more laissez-faire attitude, laissez-faire approach to implementing ALM. When you're building up those assets, also think about change management strategy. You're going to want to sometimes have things you get from your production bot and update those in dev. Have a consistent strategy across your different environments, including your ALM. Ensure you thought about your different security choices. As we highlighted, make sure that you don't have problems deploying between different environments. And then use the COE starter kit. It's a great resource and it adds a whole bunch of value for governing and managing your bots. Anything else you want to add?
I think, just the big thing is don't leave this till the end.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's benefits along the way, as you go through different testing cycles. And so the time to sort of set this up isn't, the day before go live. It really is sort of early, right? It should be part of your upfront environment strategy discussion, whether that's within your project team or within your IT team or whoever sort of governing your environment, and then think about how to go ahead and get the DevOps set up earlier. You can do it manually, but you will get just more benefit the earlier you get involved in this. And it isn't all that complex to set up either. So it is just something to get after earlier than later.
Yeah, I think on you're saying about the complexity, this is one thing that quite a lot of customers don't realize is it's actually reasonably simple, right? It's not, it doesn't have to be a massive undertaking. We completely failed our advice though, because we did this in session 6 where we should have done it in session 1.
I think setting up the Azure pipelines, the DevOps using the build tools, it's literally if you have the right access inside of DevOps, it's probably going to take you about 2 hours to set up for the first time. And then any subsequent bot is probably going to take you about 15 minutes. So we're talking about that type of investment. To get that consistency and productivity. You'll easily recover those 2 hours or so.
You recover it the first time you deploy, right? It's the first time you deploy, you'll get that back.
Exactly.
Yeah. Fantastic. So this was the last in the session of 6. So please go back and look at the other sessions. We went through planning your first bot, and obviously the things we talked about here are very aligned with that. So please go and check that out if you haven't. Then Abhi took us through a great session on kind of all the ways in which you build out your PVA bot. We then extended it with Power Platform and with Azure. We went through some advanced topics on things like analytics and escalation to an agent, and then this session on governance. So thank you for joining us and watching them all. And please like and subscribe and leave your comments in the chat below.
Yeah, if you feel that there's anything that we've missed, please do go ahead and add it to the comments, and that's something that we'll look at to enhance this over time as well.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.